Welcome to the Explainer. All right, let's talk about something that, let's be honest, a lot of us find kind of daunting: research. But what if I told you it's not some horrible chore you have to get through? What if it's actually a superpower? Today we're going to break it all down step by step and show you exactly how to unlock it. Okay, first things first, let's get something straight. There's a huge difference between what most of us do every day, that endless passive scrolling, and real research. One is like mindlessly eating junk food for your brain. The other, that's deep research. That's about actively building real solid knowledge. It's like cooking a gourmet meal for your mind.
So, I want you to completely reframe how you think about this. Research is not a chore. It's not something you just have to power through. Seriously, think of it more like a journey, a quest. You're not just collecting facts. You are an explorer, charting your own path to some real, genuine insight. So, here's our game plan for today. First, we'll go from a big, fuzzy topic to a super sharp question. Then, we'll hunt down the good stuff, the literature. Next up, we'll switch on our critical thinking. And finally, we'll talk about how to make all that knowledge really stick by creating something with it.
All right, let's dive into part one. Every great adventure needs a destination, right? For us, that's not just a topic, it's a question. This is, and I mean this, the single most important step. A good question is your compass. It's going to guide every single thing you do from this point forward.
So where do we all start? Usually with something huge, right? Like mental health. And that's a fine place to begin. But it's also like trying to drink the entire ocean. You just can't. To get anywhere, you've got to narrow it down.
So the trick is to find your angle. In this giant universe of mental health, what's the one thing that really truly grabs you? Maybe it's the link between money and how people feel. See? Now we're starting to carve out a path you can actually walk down.
And from there, the goal is to get super specific. You go from that general idea about financial well-being to a crystal clear research question. Something like, what is the impact of low socioeconomic status during childhood on the later development of psychiatric disorders? Bam! See that? That's not an ocean anymore. That's a real puzzle you can actually solve. And that's what makes the whole thing manageable and, honestly, way more interesting.
Okay, so we've got our question, our compass is set. Now it's time to become a map maker. It's time to map the existing terrain of knowledge.
Listen, your number one best friend when you start this hunt is something called a review paper. Seriously, this is your secret weapon. Think of it like a cheat sheet written by an expert who's already done a ton of the hard work for you. It gives you the lay of the land, summarizes everything. It is an absolute gold mine.
And the strategy here is simple, but it's so powerful. You find one good, recent review paper, then you go straight to its reference section. That's your treasure map. From there, you follow the breadcrumbs backward to find the classic, foundational studies, and you can trace them forward to see the latest and greatest stuff. You're basically building a spider web of knowledge, one connection at a time.
And the best part? You don't have to do all this with index cards and highlighters. We have amazing tools now. Use a reference manager like Zotero. It's like having a personal librarian who never sleeps. Then there are these knowledge mappers like Research Rabbit. Oh man, these things are incredible. They literally draw you a map of how all the papers connect. And of course, you need a second brain, something like Notion or Obsidian, where you can dump all your notes and quotes and start to see the themes emerge. It's a game changer.
All right, section 3, you've gathered all this information. Now it's time to put on your detective hat. You're not just a librarian anymore. You're a detective, and your job is to question everything.
There's a great quote from a researcher, Charlotte Frazier, that really hits this home. She says you can't just blindly trust your sources. I mean, think about it. Research is done by people, right? And it's usually happening right at the very edge of what we know. So it's messy, it's not always perfect, and it almost always has limits. A little bit of healthy skepticism is probably your best tool here.
So for every single paper you read, you should run it through a kind of mental checklist. First up, who paid for this? Always follow the money. Next, does the data actually say what the headline claims it says? Or is it just hype? A big one is correlation versus causation. Are they proving that A causes B, or just that A and B happen together? Are they leaning on emotional anecdotes instead of real evidence? And here's a little pro tip. Look for the part where the authors talk about their own study's limitations. That's a really good sign. It shows they're being honest.
I mean, check this out. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You see this wild headline, "Depression is caused by chocolate," but then you actually dig in, and what do you find? Well, turns out it was a correlational study on mice. Not quite the same thing, is it? You have got to read the fine print.
Okay,
On to our final step. You've found your sources, you've interrogated them, but we're not done. This last part is absolutely crucial. It's about how you make all that knowledge truly, deeply yours.
So, let's talk about the difference between passive and active learning. We all do the passive stuff, reading, highlighting, scrolling. It feels like you're doing something, right? But it doesn't really stick. Real, deep understanding, that only comes when you get active. When you create something, when you try to teach it, when you're forced to explain it.
So, what does that actually look like? Well, try writing a one-page summary that answers your original question. Or grab a friend and try to explain the main idea to them from scratch with no notes. That process of pulling the information out of your brain and putting it into your own words, that's the magic. That's what makes it stick.
Okay, here's a really powerful habit to get into. Right when you start, you're a beginner. And the questions you have then, the ones that feel kind of dumb or obvious, those are gold. Write every single one of them down. Because as you learn more, you'll lose that beginner's mind, and you can never get that fresh perspective back. So capture it while you can.
And this brings us to this really cool, kind of beautiful paradox of doing research. You start the whole journey looking for answers, right? But what you find, if you really stick with it, is that the answers aren't even the most interesting part. The real treasure is that you learn how to ask better and more interesting questions. The journey actually changes you. So, let's end with a question for you. Think about it. What are you curious about right now? What's that one question that's been kind of buzzing around in the back of your mind? That's your starting point. That's the most powerful thing you have. Your journey starts right there.